Baking is a method of preparing food that uses dry heat, typically in an oven, but can also be done in hot ashes, or on hot stones. The most common baked item is bread, but many other types of foods are baked. 1. Heat is gradually transferred from the surface of cakes, cookies, and breads to their center. As heat travels through, it transforms batters and doughs into baked goods and more, with a firm dry crust and a softer center. 2. Baking can be combined with grilling to produce a hybrid barbecue variant by using both methods simultaneously, or one after the other. Baking is related to barbecuing because the concept of the masonry oven is similar to that of a smoke pit. Because of historical, social, and familial roles. Baking has traditionally been performed at home by women for day-to-day meals and by men in bakeries and restaurants for local consumption. When production was industrialized, baking was automated by machines in large factories. The art of baking remains a fundamental skill and is important for nutrition, as baked goods, especially breads, are a common and important food, both from an economic and cultural point of view. A person who prepares baked goods as a profession is called a baker. On a related note, a pastry chef is someone who is trained in the art of making pastries, desserts, bread and other baked goods. The first evidence of baking occurred when humans took wild grass grains, soaked them in water, and mixed everything together, mashing it into a kind of broth-like paste. 3. The paste was cooked by pouring it onto a flat, hot rock, resulting in a bread-like substance. Later, when humans mastered fire, the paste was roasted on hot embers, which made bread making easier, as it could now be made any time fire was created. The world's oldest oven was discovered in Croatia in 2014, dating back 6,500 years ago. The ancient Egyptians baked bread using yeast, which they had previously been using to brew beer. 4. Bread baking began in ancient Greece around 600 BC, leading to the invention of enclosed ovens. 4. Ovens and work tables have been discovered in archaeological digs from Turkey, Asila, to Palestine, Jericho, Tel Es Sultan, and date back to 5600 BC. Eventually, the Roman art of baking became known throughout Europe and eventually spread to eastern parts of Asia. By the 13th century in London, commercial trading, including baking, had many regulations attached. In the case of food, they were designed to create a system so there was little possibility of false measures, adulterated food or shoddy manufactures. There were by the time 20 regulations applying to bakers alone, including that every baker had to have the impression of his seal upon bread. 6. Beginning in the 19th century, alternative leavening agents became more common, such as baking soda. 4. Bakers often baked goods at home and then sold them in the streets. This scene was so common that Rembrandt, among others, painted a pastry chef selling pancakes in the streets of Germany, with children clamoring for a sample. In London, pastry chefs sold their goods from hand carts. This developed into a delivery system of baked goods to households and greatly increased demand as a result. In Paris, the first open-air cafe of baked goods was developed, and baking became an established art throughout the entire world. Baking eventually developed into a commercial industry using automated machinery which enabled more goods to be produced for widespread distribution. In the United States, the baking industry was built on marketing methods used during feudal times and production techniques developed by the Romans. 9. Some makers of snacks such as potato chips or crisps have produced baked versions of their snack products as an alternative to the usual cooking method of deep frying in an attempt to reduce their calorie or fat content. Baking has opened up doors to businesses such as cake shops and factories where the baking process is done with larger amounts in large, open furnaces. The aroma and texture of baked goods as they come out of the oven are strongly appealing, but is a quality that is quickly lost. Since the flavor and appeal largely depend on freshness, commercial producers have to compensate by using food additives as well as imaginative labeling. As more and more baked goods are purchased from commercial suppliers, producers try to capture that original appeal by adding the label home-baked. Such attempts seek to make an emotional link to the remembered freshness of baked goods as well as to attach positive associations the purchaser has with the idea of home to the bought product. Freshness is such an important quality that restaurants, although they are commercial, and not domestic, preparers of food, bake their own products. For example, scones at the Ritz London Hotel are not baked until early afternoon on the day they are to be served, to make sure they are as fresh as possible. Baking, especially of bread, holds special significance for many cultures. It is such a fundamental part of everyday food consumption that the children's nursery rhyme pat a cake. Baker's man takes baking as its subject. Baked goods are normally served at all kinds of parties and special attention is given to their quality at formal events. They are also one of the main components of a tea party, including at nursery teas and high teas, a tradition which started in Victorian Britain, reportedly when Anna Russell, Duchess of Bedford, grew tired of the sinking feeling which afflicted her every afternoon round 4 o'clock. In 1840, she plucked up courage and asked for a tray of tea, bread and butter, and cake to be brought to her room. Once she had formed the habit, she found she could not break it, so spread it among her friends instead. As the century progressed, afternoon tea became increasingly elaborate. The Benedictine sisters of the Benedictine monastery of Caltanissetta baked a pastry called Croissant of Caltanissetta, Cross of Caltanissetta. They used to be prepared for the Holy Crucifix festivity. The monastery was situated next to the Church of the Holy Cross, from which these sweet pastries take the name. For Jews, matzo is a baked product of considerable religious and ritual significance. baked matzah bread can be ground up and used in other dishes, such as gefilte fish, and baked again. For Christians, bread has to be baked to be used as an essential component of the sacrament of the Eucharist. In the Eastern Christian tradition, baked bread in the form of birds is given to children to carry to the fields in a spring ceremony that celebrates the 40 martyrs of Sebast. 17. Jesus defines himself as the bread of life, John 6:35. Divine grace is called bread of the strong and preaching, religious teaching, the bread of the Word of God. In Roman Catholicism, the piece of blessed wax encased in a reliquary is the sacred bread. In Hebrew, Bethlehem means the house of bread, and Christians see in the fact that Jesus was born, before moving to Nazareth, in a city of that name, the significance of his sacrifice via the Eucharist. The dry heat of baking changes the form of starches in the food and causes its outer surfaces to brown, giving it an attractive appearance and taste. The browning is caused by caramelization of sugars and the Maillard reaction. Maillard browning occurs when sugars break down in the presence of proteins. Because foods contain many different types of sugars and proteins, Maillard browning contributes to the flavor of a wide range of foods, including nuts, roast beef and baked bread. 15. The moisture is never entirely sealed in. Over time, an item being baked will become dry. This is often an advantage, especially in situations where drying is the desired outcome, like drying herbs or roasting certain types of vegetables. The baking process does not require any fat to be used to cook in an oven. When baking, consideration must be given to the amount of fat that is contained in the food item. Higher levels of fat such as margarine, butter, lard, or vegetable shortening will cause an item to spread out during the baking process. With the passage of time, breads harden and become stale. This is not primarily due to moisture being lost from the baked products, but more a reorganization of the way in which the water and starch are associated over time. This process is similar to recrystallization and is promoted by storage at cool temperatures, such as in a domestic refrigerator or freezer.
Every family used to prepare the bread for its own consumption. The thread of baking, not having yet taken shape.